Don't miss Transport Futures Highway Construction and Operations webinar on April 20th at 1 p.m. EST. Experts from the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, University of Toronto, Parsons, IRIS, and the University of Cambridge will be discussing advances in contracting, building, road standards, transportation systems management, traffic safety, and environmental protection, as well as innovations that could be implemented in the future. DCN subscribers receive a 10% discount with promo code DCN23. So check out all the details at transportfutures.ca/highway. Proudly sponsored by DCN. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Michael Carrick, ConstructConnect chief economist,
and Michael Guckes, senior economist with ConstructConnect.
And we're going to talk about the green economy today for one of our semi-monthly economic powwows, which means I get out of the way and let these geniuses talk because I don't know anything and they know it all. So let's start with the green economy. You recently, Alex, wrote about just how expensive it's going to be, necessary but expensive it's going to be to decarbonize, and all these different manufacturing and other industries that are going to have to do this, and how the challenges they face, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, it's just before we went to air, we talked about how Michael brought up about how complex everything is, and that's the truth of the matter. And we're seeing all these projects go ahead, and car companies are building electric vehicle plants, and they're building battery plants like mad, and it's just a tremendous amount of money that's going to be involved in building these projects. But the article that you're talking about, I tried to look at the whole thing. I tried to come up with a shorthand way of looking at all of this. And if you're in the building product area, it really comes down to substituting on the fuel side or the production side, whatever fossil fuels go into your production process, trying to substitute something that's what you'd call sustainable as opposed to fossil fuels. And so if you just think about steel making, of course, a lot of coal goes into it, and cement, there's a lot of carbon emissions from cement and so on, and glass making and aluminum manufacturing and so on, but aluminum's electrolysis. So in all these processes, it's more or less trying to replace fossil fuels with something else, and almost always that ends up being electricity or hydrogen. And then you got the argument about if it's electricity, it's got to be sustainable electricity. It can't be electricity that's generated through burning natural gas or coal. So it's got to be solar, wind, geothermal, or nuclear, or hydroelectric. Now, the one thing here for Canadian audiences is that Canada, really almost all the electricity in Canada is from hydroelectric and nuclear. A lot of it's nuclear as well. So if you're an aluminum manufacturer, the aluminum manufacturers in Quebec and BC, for example, they have bragging rights that they're doing green aluminum because they use hydroelectric power. But all of this, so all these companies have to change over. Glass manufacturers, there's experiments in Germany where they're using hydrogen to create heat, and there's experiments in Sweden where they're using hydrogen to replace coal in blast furnaces and so on. But replacing fossil fuels with these sustainable fuels really, really expensive. So it's going to be difficult to make all these choices, and just in terms of mining things and so on, it's going to be expensive. But we'll come to that later. So I'll turn it over to Michael.
Yeah, Michael, you sent us an article a couple days ago about how New York is going to try and put in EV chargers in many different places because it is already becoming one of the greener cities in the United States. But just how difficult that is. So you could go into just how challenging it is, just from the EV standpoint of getting the infrastructure in there.
Sure. I mean, the infrastructure is just one component of it. When I worked for the Department of Transportation, one of the greatest challenges you face when building transportation and moving electrical wires around underground and moving utilities around, there's all sorts of right-of-way concerns. Those things take a lot of time to resolve. Sometimes those require the intervention of courts. So that can be very complicated right there. Secondly, comes the question of, well, what is ideal, right? So imagine you could put in, 10 slow chargers that take 10 hours to fully charge
Hmm.
a generic electric vehicle, or you could put in one fast charger that can do 10 cars in the same amount of time because it charges the battery fully in 1 hour. And it's just a simple, example of, well, what makes the most sense to install?
Hmm.
Because these are the kinds of questions that really could be game changers for the success of green energy programs. Do we install 10 cheaper, slower charging chargers in 10 parking spots somewhere in a city, or do you install one and somehow, essentially force the people to cycle their cars through a lot faster? You can't, somebody will have to come up with a rule that says you cannot leave your fully charged EV sitting in front of a charger, all day, every day, just because it's convenient for you.
Hmm.
There's so many issues, right? Not just logistical, but societal issues that we're going to have to figure out. How do we get people to behave in a conducive way that benefits, everybody and gets the biggest bang for, our infrastructure buck, right? So there's an incredible complexity to this that we, won't even have time to address today, but they are issues that will have to be addressed at some point.
What it reminded me of is about 30 odd years ago when high-speed internet was just rolling out. There was a whole last mile problem, and this sounds a lot like a more complicated version of the last mile problem because it's not just data you're sending. It's you have to have transformers and other electrical infrastructure that you don't really have to have for, say, to fiber optic cables.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's going to have to be something done to speed up approvals for a lot of things. Like
Hmm.
if if you're really looking for the challenges, it's very easy to just go on YouTube and find people who are saying that, there just isn't the mining capacity to come up with the materials that are needed to make these things. Like if you're going to expand electricity production, you've got to have the turbines and the generators and the solar panels and the windmills and all these things, and you got to make them. And
Hmm.
and it's the materials that go into them, but it's also the machinery. Somebody's got to be building all the machinery to do this, and so you've always got to think about the implications of these things. And there's a whole level of irony involved in this because the people who are really promoting and pretty much, I mean, we've all sort of come around to the idea that this is a good idea. So I shouldn't
Hmm.
say the people who are promoting, but the ones who have been actively pushing for sustainable, uh, a sustainable future and a clean future and a green future and so on. They're the same ones who oppose building new mining projects. And there's an irony factor there. Like if you want to build a new copper mine or a new nickel mine, it takes years to bring
Hmm.
those on stream. And that whole approvals process is going to have to be speeded up. And the minerals are going to have to be found. Like everybody knows that lithium is a key part of this future that everybody's talking about. But where's the lithium? Where do you locate it?
Hmm.
there's a triangle in South America between Chile and Argentina and Bolivia that's known as the lithium triangle. So you're dealing with countries that haven't always been as friendly towards private enterprises as you might want either. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of balls to be juggled, a lot of things in motion.
Sorry,
You
Michael,
know,
it sounded like you want to jump in. Yeah.
yeah, there, just a few other critical issues, and then I think we need to get past this. Otherwise, we're going to leave everybody who's listening to this podcast
Yes.
just totally desperate
depressed.
and downtrodden. But as Alec was getting to, the labor shortage. The labor shortage is not only a shortage in numbers, but also in labor skilled composition. We have, according to the BLS, and I'm getting this third hand, somewhere they are projecting that we will be 80,000 electricians short of the number that the economy needs each year between now and 2031. And it's simply because we don't have enough people to maintain all the wind turbines that we're going to need. And this is the point that Alec was making just a moment ago. I'm just kind of taking it a step further, right? But if we don't have the people to build the parts and we don't have the people to maintain the equipment once it's up and running, these create huge problems that are essentially deal breakers in a sense. If the wind turbines can't be maintained and they shut down and there's no one to fix them, you've now spent a lot of carbon and money to build a glorified post that's sticking up out of the ground with, three beautiful turbine blades on it, and it's doing utterly nothing. So those are, that's yet one more of the issues, right? His point about lithium, I think there's one lithium mine out west in the United States that is looking to increase production, and that's great, but most likely it alone can't solve the country's lithium needs. And the countries that Alec did mention, right? Many of those, it's not certain if they would even be part of a North American European trade bloc, because what we're seeing today, right, is Russia, China, certain countries in South America and Africa are sort of leaning towards one global system there, and then there's another global system. It's some Asian countries, North America and Europe, kind of forming a secondary international trade bloc. And the question I have when you think about that and where and how we're ending up with these two different global trading systems is, can the world achieve its green energy goals and initiatives when we have essentially dissected or bisected the global trade in whole in this way, right? I don't think either half can do it on their own. And interestingly enough, right, think about this: if North America, Europe, and certain parts of Asia continue forward with their green energy goals, and the other half decides to just do away with any plans for green energy, does that tank the future of the world anyways? Right. So anyways, that's about as dismal as I think we should go. I think there's a lot.
I was going to say, yeah.
let's change gears though and talk real quickly about where are the opportunities, right? As construction leaders, this whole green energy initiative in North America creates lots of opportunities for construction leaders to focus on. And if we start looking at things like, where are the next generation of car manufacturing plants going to be located? Where is the next generation of EV battery plants going to be located? It's really interesting because we see certain classical Rust Belt states, the Kentuckys and the Michigan and the Ohio's, and even a little bit of Tennessee, some of the classic Rust Belt will be revived from this. But there's also a host of new states that we can anticipate participating in this sort of in this burgeoning sector, right? Places like North Carolina, Kansas, Georgia, Kentucky, and Tennessee again. So what we will how let me put it this way: where we will see this burgeoning growth, and in which verticals we can expect to see this burgeoning growth, should be fairly evident. And so for our construction leaders of the future, right? They can look at the landscape and pretty clearly, I think, say, hey, we need to be building our company towards, serving the needs of these obvious areas. And I think that's the real positive message that we can share here is that, while there are all these challenges to going green, there's so much opportunity, and it's going to require a structural change of our economy, of our infrastructure, and therefore it's going to also require a similar change in the mindsets of how construction companies build themselves to address the needs of the future. Just like we said before, they're going to need to up their electrician counts. They're going to need to up their skills in how do we manage, utility construction, things of that nature. And that's a good thing, right? Because that will allow them to grow, and it will allow our countries in plural, to achieve the kinds of positive goals that we're all talking about here.
Alec, what's your take on positivity and infrastructure in the economy?
I'm just going to pile on some more. That's my.
Okay, go for it.
Because another challenge is recycling. Nobody's really fully, except it's interesting that there are companies out there who are building big plants to recycle batteries and to try to recover the metals that are in spent batteries or whatever. So, but recycling's an issue. But yeah, that's one of those challenges that is being met. There's already several companies that are spending really large sums of money in that area. Now, the other thing, no, well, I'm very positive. Like whenever I speak to groups now, I talk about this because this is just such an incredible thing. If you think about it, we've been living on fossil fuels for hundreds of years. If you go back to steamships and so on, and the world is being asked to get off fossil fuels literally within the next 25 years, because the goal is to have carbon neutral world by 2050. And that's just an incredible challenge. And I don't see how that can't be very, very positive for construction in terms of the projects that are out there. Like carbon capture and storage is something. Another one is hydrogen. Like an awful lot of most of when people talk about the solution, they talk about the need for doubling or tripling the capacity of electric power generation and so on. But then the major other alternative seems to be hydrogen, like extracting hydrogen, and there's several ways of doing it, and they've all got colors now. They talk about blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen that's derived from methane, and then it's you've got to capture the CO2, you got to put it underground. That's where the carbon capture and storage comes in. And then green hydrogen is if you use electrolysis to separate hydrogen atoms from oxygen and water, and then the only byproduct is water. And then there's something called red hydrogen or pink hydrogen, which is if you use electrolysis, but the power that you use is nuclear to get it. The thing with hydrogen, though, hydrogen does seem to have a lot of potential, but hydrogen's even harder to store than LNG, liquefied natural gas, and so it's trickier. It's even trickier to handle than some of the alternatives. But we're talking construction. I think there's a huge opportunity for schools here, because at the level of community colleges and higher education, they've got to train people in all these new areas that are coming up. As Michael was saying, you need engineers in different areas than before, and you need chemists in different areas than before. So I hope that the universities are paying attention to this, and I'm sure they are, because they're the academics. And Warren, you said earlier that we know everything. We don't know everything. The people at the universities, they know everything.
Okay.
So I'm
I'll take your
assuming
word for
that I'm assuming that they're foreseeing that they've got to have these new courses and these new course offerings, and so on, to get people where they're going to be needed in this new world that we're heading into, whether we like it or not, or whether we even understand it or not. I mean, that's the thing. I don't think, it's not even that easy to understand. Anyway, that's
my final question is, because given we just had a budget here in Canada, which the green economy was probably the dominant thing in it, and then the IIJA, when I was down in Las Vegas for Con Expo, that's pretty much most of what people were talking about, both, which also has a huge green component to it. So what's government's, like, government has to have a role in all this, something this transformative. So where do you guys see government doing its best work? I mean, that might be an oxymoron, but let's roll with it anyway.
Yeah, well, government is if they can put into place policies and make some money available and so on, but then they're going to have to leave it up to the private sector, because the government making these decisions on its own and making bets as to who the winners and the losers are going to be among various industry types and various companies. That's government has not had a good track record of being able to do that sort of thing. So what they're going to have to do is put in place policies that will be where they can really act quickly to take advantage of things that seem to be working in this area, and in particular an electric power policy, and it really should be North American. Really should be North American, and we've been really battering fossil fuels, and the truth of the matter is, fossil fuels are going to be around for a while, and North America. The companies in North America have this huge price differential, and there's, you really just shouldn't just walk away from this, because we have the resources. We've got this huge price advantage. So many of the cars that are on the road still use gasoline, and that's not going to change overnight.
I fully agree with Alec. I think one of the things that our governments in general have become too comfortable with is the idea of throwing money at everything, as if the only way to get investments to occur is through some sort of government cash giveaways. I think that if we allow the private sector to do its job efficiently, as it oftentimes does, maybe we look at things like taxing, the fossil fuels, not just continuously subsidizing any kind of green energy initiative, because a lot of them don't have a legitimate return on investment. You don't have to have a legitimate return on investment if the government's just going to throw money at everything. But in the private sector, if we discourage people from consuming as much fossil fuel as they have in the past, then it will, make them look towards the substitute goods that they need, like an electric vehicle or whatnot. And it's not something that it's not something that is foreign to us, right? I mean, we have taxes already on gasoline and other products that are not environmentally friendly. And we don't complain. I mean, there's the typical amount of complaining, but gas prices go up and consumption of gasoline goes down because people better optimize their trips, or they realize some trips they don't have to make, right? And so you allow the people to make the decisions that are best for them, but also achieve those social goals. And so, that's where I would like to see things go, is that the government simply realizes, hey, let's put the solution in the hands of each individual, because many small changes is what it's going to take to achieve the goals that we've all been talking about. It's not going to take the government just coming in and forcing things, or spending billions and billions of dollars to sort of force through a solution. That's not going to work. In the end, it's people that will make these solutions work, and it's all their little choices each and every day. I'll make this real simple, but it drives me crazy. We talk about how we're all so green, and then if you go to a parking lot, count the number of cars where somebody is sitting in the car on a 70-degree day with their engine running. And it drives me crazy. It's like, just open your window. It's a beautiful day. You don't need to be running your car engine for 45 minutes or an hour while you're sitting in a parking lot. Things like that.
Okay, well, I think we're ending on an optimistic note, so I'd like to thank both of you for joining us once again.
Yeah, well, thank you, Warren. Thank you for
Thank you, Warren,
hosting us.